Amen. John chapter 11, this morning's I am statement. Go ahead, find your way there. We're going to start in John chapter 11, verse 17, read down a few verses, and then skip down to verse 38. So John chapter 11, verse 17. When Jesus arrived, where's Jesus going? Well, Jesus had just heard that one of his best friends, Lazarus, was sick, and now Lazarus had died. Jesus was off a little ways with his disciples doing something else, but Jesus took his time on getting back, and now Lazarus is dead. And so Jesus is arriving basically at the funeral deal, okay? The morning of Lazarus' death. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been dead in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, less than 2 miles away. Many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Then Martha, the brother of Lazarus, said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here," you can hear a little bit of tinge of resentment in Martha's voice. "Lord Jesus, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." Jesus responds, verse 23, "Your brother will rise again," Jesus told her. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am," here it is, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." "Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world." So that's Jesus' interaction with Martha. Martha runs out from the party, meets Jesus along the way. What we see next in verses 28 down to verse 37 is Mary actually hears of Jesus' arrival, runs out to, meets Mary, and says something very, very similar to what her sister Martha had said. And said, "Jesus, if you had only been here, this wouldn't have happened. If you weren't late, if you were on time, if you were where you were supposed to be, my brother would still be alive." And so Jesus is a little frustrated. This is the passage where it says Jesus wept. He's upset. His friend has died, and the people that have seen him make blind people see and lame people run don't believe in him. And so he goes to the tomb for himself. Verse 38. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. "Remove the stone," Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, "Lord, there's already a stench because he has been dead 4 days." Her point, Jesus is a little too late. 4 days dead. He's really dead. Jesus said to her, "Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you heard me. And I know that you always hear me. But because of the crowd standing here, I said this so that they may believe you sent me." After he said this, after he prayed this, he shouted with a loud voice, "Lazarus," to the dead man. "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips, with his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unwrap him and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Jesus here does something incredible. Says to the man who had been dead for 4 days, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man comes out. Unwrap him and let him go. He lives. He lives. I don't know what you did as a child. I tried my hand at t-ball. I was going to say baseball, but that's allowed because they're different. And the ball doesn't move in t-ball. And so I tried my hand at t-ball, and even that was too much hand-eye coordination for me. Wasn't equipped for that kind of thing. And so I tried football in the 6th grade. I loved football. I wasn't good good at it, but I was good at running into things. And so I tried my hand at that, and I was okay. I was okay. 6th grade I played. It was fun. 7th grade was the year. 7th grade was the year we were going to do it. What's it? The 7th grade year was the season, the year that we were going to beat the Warriors. Right? 6th grade year, we got pummeled by the Warriors. In the 7th grade year, we were the last team on the Warriors' schedule. We were the Bears. The Bears were going to take down the Warriors. And each week, we watched the Warriors score. And each week, they would go to a different school, and they would beat that different team, not by 3, not by 7, but by 21, 40, or 60. And so each week we're watching like, oh man, it's coming. It's coming. We're going to dominate you. We're going to beat you. You're no match for us. And so I remember game week. Game week is here. We're going to beat the Warriors. And the first practice of the week, the football coach gets up. Football coach gets up in front of us and says to us, this is it. You've been working for a year, and this needs to be the best week of practice we've ever had. I mean, he is sweating almost to tears and passion. Right? Think Braveheart. And he says, guys, I want you to pour your blood, sweat, and tears on this practice field this week. And if you believe in yourself, we're going to go and we're going to beat the Warriors. And I remember that was the best practice week we ever had. We did pour our 7th grade blood, sweat, and tears like it mattered out on that field. We did. I think we practiced early and we practiced late. We watched film. I don't know in what day in a 7th grader need to watch film, but we watched film. We had a game plan. We had the effort. We had the I'm going to win mentality. We believed in ourselves, and there came Saturday. We rolled up to the field. We strapped on our helmets. We put on our cleats. We walked on the field. The Warriors beat us by 60. They did. They beat us back and forth, up and down the field. Why? Because we were no match for the Warriors. We had no reason to be on the same field. They were out of our league. We were simply no match. No matter how hard we practiced, no matter how much our mom told us to believe in ourselves, we were no match for the Warriors. But what we find out here in John chapter 11 is that death and sin are no match for Jesus. It doesn't matter what the sickness, it doesn't matter what the sin, it doesn't matter how far we've gone or where we've been, it does not matter the name. It does not matter the act. Death and sin are no match for Jesus. This is why we have to take Jesus very, very seriously. We've talked about this before, that when your weird cousin shows up to the family reunion and says, I'm the Son of God, I'm from heaven, we can laugh him off, right? Because he's not raising people from the dead. He's not making blind people see and deaf people hear. He's not making people who've been lame all their life get up and run. But Jesus does. Jesus is the one who conquers sin, death, and the grave. That is Jesus. Lazarus, come out! And the dead man does. I cannot get a 3-year-old to put on her shoes, but Jesus makes dead people come to life. Jesus is different. He's not just some guy. I am, Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. And you know what the death and resurrection of Lazarus does? Points us to the death and resurrection of Jesus. Jesus isn't just in the business of telling people to do something. No, Jesus does it himself. Bringing somebody else back to life is one thing, but telling your own self to get up from the dead is another. Hear me, church. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And death and sin are no match for Jesus. No match for Jesus. This had a huge impact on the life of Lazarus. This should have a huge impact on the life of us. This has huge implications for for Lazarus. And it has huge implications for us. And so very quickly this morning, let's just look at 3 things that we have in common with Lazarus. 3 quick things that we have in common with Lazarus. The first thing that we have in common with Lazarus is this: Jesus raises us. The first thing that we have in common with Lazarus: Jesus raises us. Look at verses 43 and 44 again with me. After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice. So remember, Jesus had been praying, and then he turns his eyes to the tomb of Lazarus, and he shouts with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out. He shouts to the tomb, he shouts to the dead man, "Lazarus, come out," and Lazarus comes out. The ending of this story is drastically different than the beginning. Because you see, if you look all the way back, when Jesus steps on the scene, before Jesus gets there, it is a sad story. Before Jesus shows up, it is a sad scene. His friend Lazarus had been sick and is now dead. Jesus, taking his time, shows up a few days later, and it's too late. Lazarus is dead. Lazarus is 4 days dead. He's really dead. His sisters and their friends, their family are mourning. It's a sad scene. I don't know about you, but I don't like funerals. I used to make a joke as a preacher that I'd rather do a funeral than a wedding. I don't make that joke anymore because I don't like funerals. His friends and family around mourning, they are terribly sad. They are upset because their brother, their friend has died, and there's nothing that they can do about it. They're hopeless. Lazarus' sisters have become resentful. We saw their comments, right? Jesus, if you had only been here. Jesus, if you would have been on time. Jesus, God does anything that you ask him to do. Why weren't you here? Why didn't you ask? They're hopeless and resenting Jesus. Lazarus is dead. He's really dead. When he goes to roll away the tomb, his sister even says, "Jesus, he stinks. It's been too long. This is a mess. He's really dead." But then Jesus, in verses 43 and 44, the verses we just read, Jesus shows up and does something that we talk about a whole lot. Jesus shows up and Jesus changes everything. Would you remember that this morning? That Jesus really does change everything. When we think somebody is too far gone, Jesus shows up and changes everything. Right when we think that all hope is lost, Jesus shows up and changes everything. Right when we think that this is not going to get better, Jesus shows up and does a new work. Jesus stands at the front of the tomb, and at Jesus' command, the man is alive. Lazarus is back from the dead. What in the world does this have to do with us? I told you these are three things that we have in common with Lazarus. The first one is Jesus raises us. Now, I was at a coffee shop this week, and I was talking with the people there, and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm preaching on Lazarus this week." And I said, "Do you know the story of Lazarus?" And they said, "Yeah, that's the guy that Jesus woke up, right?" I said, "Yeah, the guy that Jesus woke up." And I said, "Do you have any stories that I could use for an illustration?" Because I get all, I'm nothing up here with church. And just flashing. And I said, "Yeah, you got a story? You've seen people come back from the dead before? You ever been at the flea market, right, in Dixieland? And see a dead man come back to life? You ever seen that?" I was like, "Nah, I ain't never seen that." They just kind of laughed me off and moved on. Something weird preachers do. It's okay. We have something in common with Lazarus. At least, if we are a born-again believer in Jesus, we have something in common with Lazarus. You see, just like Lazarus, we were really dead. Not just kind of dead, not just a bad kid, not just immoral or need to be nicer. No, according to the Bible, the Word of God, we were dead in our trespasses and sin. Really dead. Like stinky dead, according to Ephesians chapter 2. That's something we have in common with Lazarus, that we were dead. We were lost in hopelessness, just like the family of Lazarus. Like there's nothing that we can do. Romans 5, chapter 6 says that we are utterly helpless. Anytime you get a chance to use the word utterly, use it. The Bible says that we were utterly helpless. That there's nothing we could do to save ourselves, just like the scene at Lazarus' tomb. Hopeless. And just like his sisters, usually we slip into a place of resentment, right? You know what I'm talking about? Anybody ever been lost before and it was everybody else's fault? The story of my life. It's everybody else's fault. Mom, Dad, if you would have just been here, if you would have just loved me, if you would have just not had addiction problems, if you would have just stayed married, right? Well, if that teacher would have just not been so mean and actually taught me something. Jesus, if you would have just been here, no. We have something in common with Lazarus. We were dead, really dead. We were helpless, we were hopeless. And most of us slipped into a place of resentment, looking for someone else to blame. But then Jesus shows up and does something different. Jesus changes everything. Jesus looks at us and says, come out. What did Jesus say when he first got there? Verses 25 through 26. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. In a moment of death and helplessness and hopelessness, in a situation of resentment, Jesus speaks life. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Even though Lazarus has died, because he believed in me, he will live. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Jesus shows up and does something different. He says, listen, if you believe in me, you're going to see the glory of God. If you believe in me, you're gonna see something different. If you believe in me, you're going to see me rewrite your brother's story. If you believe in me, I can rewrite yours too. Jesus changes everything, just as he showed up and changed everything here, just as he shows up and says, Lazarus, come out. He shows up to us and says, come out. Jesus says, come out. He calls us out of our sin and death. Come out. Though we were dead in our trespasses and sin, great is the mercy of God. I was riding over here this morning and I sing in the car because I can't sing anywhere else and not get booed out of the place. And I'm singing about God's mercy. And how His mercy is more. How He's greater than darkness. And His mercies are new every morn. Right? You know what I'm saying? That's what happens here. Yes, we were really dead, but Jesus says, come out. Jesus is saying today, and I said hopefully to you before, come out of your sin. Come out of your shame. Come out of your death. Come out of your hopelessness and your helplessness. Come out of your bitterness and resentment. Anybody locked up in that prison?
Amen.
He says, come out of your addiction, whatever you're wrapped up in. Come out. Come out of your self-righteousness. Come out of your be better, do better religion that cannot save you. Jesus says, come out of your self-worship and your idolatry. Come out of your endless search. Remember that? Come out of your endless search for more. Come out. Come out. Come out. Can you remember when you heard those words the first time? Just have a moment of reflection here. Like, let's go through the files. Can you remember the moment when Jesus flipped the light switch on? Can you remember the moment where it became real to you? That Jesus was greater. That His mercy is new every morning. And that death is no match for Him. You remember the moment that Jesus called your name and said, come out. And usually I ask this question in a rant, like I have been, and we just move on from it quickly, but let's sit in it for a second. Can you remember that? Where you realize, yep, I really am dead. And it's nobody else's fault. I really am helpless. There's nothing that I can do to save myself. I'm in a hole that I can't climb up out of. There's not a ladder tall enough. But then Jesus called you out. Reached down and pulled you out. Can you remember that? that moment. And we're not talking about when Jesus asked you to be nice. We're talking about when Jesus made you new. We're not talking about when you were confirmed or when you were baptized. We're talking about when you passed from death to life. We're not talking about when you decided to turn over a new leaf and try a new thing. We're talking about when Jesus took a broken and helpless, sinful heart and put life in it. Can you remember when Jesus called you out? If not, today Jesus is calling. If you can't remember that in your life, if you can't pinpoint at least a season where Jesus became a real life person to you, and you became alive, if you can't pinpoint at least a season of that, today is the day that Jesus is calling. Today, just like he said to Lazarus, Jesus is saying, Jesus is calling. Come out. Breathe. Live. Come out. That's good news, amen? We were really dead, but Jesus offers us life. And the story doesn't end there. That's good news, and there's some really good news about to happen at the end of verse 44. First, Jesus raises us. Secondly, Jesus unwraps us. Yes, Jesus raises us, but Jesus also unwraps us. So what happens next? Jesus calls to the dead man in the tomb. He says, hey, Lazarus, come out. And to everybody's surprise, right? Because everybody's like, wait, what's going to happen? Lazarus really does come out, and he is wrapped up in grave clothes. Can you imagine the emotion that's going through Lazarus' mind right now? Like, he's been dead for 4 days. Right? One moment, he's on his deathbed, then he's with the Lord, because to be absent from my body is to be with the Lord, and then he hears his name called, and he's with the Lord, but it's back before his death. Like, right? I mean, what kind of sense does that make? Right? That's crazy. It's crazy. He's wrapped up, can't move, his face is covered in a great cloth. Look at verse 44 real quick. The dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips, and with his face wrapped in a cloth, all bound up. Alive but not free. And Jesus says, unwrap him and let him go. Jesus raised Lazarus, but he also unwrapped Lazarus. Unwrap him and let him go. Hear this, Transformation Church. Hear this. If you're new here, hear this. Jesus doesn't make us alive so that we can live in bondage.
Amen.
You hear that, church? Jesus does not make us alive. He does not bring us out of the tomb so that we can live wrapped up. He doesn't call us out so that we can stay wrapped up. He doesn't make us alive so that we can live in bondage. No, Jesus makes us alive so that we can do what? So that we can live. And this was no life. Bound up in grave clothes. Those weren't his clothes anymore because he's no longer dead. This is a live and living covenant. Remember what Jesus says just a chapter before, what we talked about last week. He says, I am the gate, right? I'm the good shepherd. And what did he come to do? To give life and life in abundance. No, Jesus doesn't make us alive so that we can live in bondage. I don't know about you, but I think this thought often. I think, why do I still struggle with this? No. Right? Anybody else ever think that? Why do I struggle with this? I've been saved 11 years. Right? 11 years ago, Jesus pulled me from the tomb, kicking and screaming. I wasn't ready. For some reason, I wanted to live in the tomb. Dead. I ago. Like, why in the world am I still making passive-aggressive comments to my wife? Anybody else think that way? Why do I still slip back into my pride? Why do I still struggle with insecurity? Anybody else there? I'm talking to myself this morning. That's great. Well, why do I still struggle with lust? Why do I still struggle with greed? Like Jesus isn't enough. Well, why do I struggle with faith? Like I've seen Jesus work over and over and over again, but I still struggle to trust Him. Almost every day I think to myself, like, why do I still struggle with this? Because Jesus is still unwrapping me. Yes, I am alive. I am new. There is life in this body now. And Jesus is still unwrapping me. The Bible talks about salvation in three main ways. The first way is this thing called justification. If you've been here for this, you know I'm not a big word guy. But these are some big words that we need to know. The first way that the Bible talks about salvation is this thing called justification. To be justified is to be declared righteous. So think about you're in the courtroom of God, and even though you are a dead sinner, He declares you righteous. He declares you innocent based on the work of Jesus Christ. That's justification. So we can look at Lazarus being called out of the tomb as he's been justified. He's been made alive. Right? And then another word that is used for salvation in the Bible is this word called glorification. Right? Glorification. This means when we get to heaven, there's going to be a day where the living and the dead are judged. Right? Where we're going to stand in that courtroom of God, and there are going to be some people who stand before the throne and who are dismissed to eternal damnation. Now, I know that's not Mormon covenant, but that's what the Bible says when we read the Bible. There will be people who did not place their faith in Jesus who will be dismissed to eternal judgment and damnation. And then there will be others who get to live in the presence and glory of God forever based on the merit and work of Jesus, not their own. That's glorification, right? Justification, you're made alive. Glorification, you live forever. But there's some life there in the middle where we live as we are saved. And that's called sanctification. Sanctification is the space between justification, you're made alive, and glorification, you will live forever. Sanctification. This is the part of our spiritual journey that happens here until we get to heaven. Jesus saves us from ourselves. Jesus helps us become more like Him. Jesus, slowly but surely, through the work of sanctification, unwraps us. You see, being a Christian, we can all breathe easy after this. Being Christian doesn't mean that we don't have a problem with sin. Amen, Christians?
Amen.
Being Christian doesn't mean that we don't have a problem with sin. It doesn't mean that we don't ever have a sin problem, but it means that we submit to a process of being unwrapped. A process of sanctification. A process of, Jesus, I know I'm not who I should be, but with you I can be. A process of, God, I need your mercy more and more every day. But God, I want to walk with you. I want to live with you. I want to be in fellowship with you. But I still feel bound up. And then, guess what Jesus does? He unwraps another layer. The first time that I noticed this, I've read this a few times, but the first time I noticed this, I was in a season where I was struggling with bitterness against my biological father, who basically cheated with my mom and then went back with his wife and had nothing else to do with me. And this ate me up. Ate me up. A lot of the sins that I committed before being saved were attached to that. Not blaming on him, it's not my fault, I chose to do this. But man, eating up with bitterness and resentment. And I remember reading this, and I'm like, man, Jesus, I know I'm alive. I know you called me out. I know I'm made new. I know my heart's beating. But why do I still struggle with this? And then I read, unwrap him and let him go. And I said, wow, I'm going to have to submit to the process of Jesus unwrapping me from bitterness and resentment. And I'll be honest with you, I'll be totally honest with you, transparent with you. Even today, I am still being unwrapped from bitterness and unforgiveness from people who have hurt me in my past. Jesus raises us, but he also unwraps us, and we need to submit to that process. Jesus raises us, he unwraps us. Is he unwrapping you? Is he unwrapping you? Is he unwrapping you? Have you submitted to the process? He raises us, he unwraps us. Thirdly, what do we have in common with Lazarus? Jesus uses us. He raises us, he unwraps us, and he uses us. Look at verse 45. Therefore, right? What's therefore? Therefore, Jesus had just brought a dead man out of the grave. Therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what Jesus did believed in him. Wow. There were people, there was a crowd there mourning Lazarus' death, and they saw Jesus call Lazarus out of the dead, right? They saw him go in the tomb. They saw his sisters genuinely mourning his death. Then they see Jesus show up and change everything. And now, guess what they do? They respond by believing in Jesus. Jesus uses Lazarus. And I know that terminology may be a little uncomfortable, right? Like, oh, so he just uses us? Like uses us and abuses us, like he takes us and he uses us to his purposes and then he just throws us out. No. So 2 Timothy, Paul talks about it this way. He talks about us being a special utensil. Listen to the language that Paul uses. He says that we are to be a special utensil for honorable use. That sounds better than being used and abused, right? A special utensil for honorable use. That we are to be, here it is, ready for the Master's use for every good work. Jesus was using Lazarus as a special utensil. After being raised and unwrapped, Lazarus became the special utensil to be used by Jesus. Jesus would even say earlier in the text, listen, the reason I delayed, the reason that I came late wasn't because I was late. The reason that I delayed, the reason that I came late is because I'm going to do something incredible. You're going to see it, and then you are going to believe. You won't have any choice. You'll see a dead man dead, and then you'll see a dead man alive. You are going to see the glory of God among you. I am going to use this. I'm going to use Lazarus. If you keep reading, right, because we want to read the Bible in context, just not pluck out little passages so that they can serve us, right? So if you keep reading into chapter 12, you're going to see Lazarus is his name again. Because Lazarus is continually being used by Jesus. And the people who are going to try to kill Jesus, guess what? They want to kill Lazarus too. They start to look around and say, man, all these people are believing in Jesus because this guy, Lazarus, was dead, but now he's alive, so we got to make him dead again. Can you imagine the danger that Lazarus experienced? Like, great, kill me, bring me right back. We'll just have a little rerun. Yeah, he was used by Jesus. He was think about this. He was an instrument playing the tune of resurrection power. That was Lazarus. Lazarus was a walking billboard to the life found in Jesus, pointing to the resurrection power of Jesus everywhere he went. People couldn't see Lazarus and not see Jesus. People saw it, people heard it, people thought it, and people believed it. Hear this transformation, and this is especially to the transformation family. Listen to this. If you have been raised and you are being unwrapped, you will be used. The New Testament church doesn't know anything about a Christian who is not used for the glory of God. You look at the Gospels, you look at the New Testament, you see people who are dead in their trespasses and sin. They meet Jesus, and then they tell everybody else about Jesus. Think about it. We already talked about the woman at the well, right? Who had 5 husbands and was lost in all kinds of sin, shacking up with a guy she wasn't married to, right? A complete relational mess. She meets Jesus. Jesus makes her new, takes her shame, and then she runs back to her village and tells everybody. Right? Think about Luke chapter 5. Love Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5, Jesus meets this guy named Levi, who is a special kind of sinner because he's a tax collector. Apology to any tax collectors. But he's living in shame. He's working for the Roman government who took over his people, cheating his people out of their money. Jesus meets him and says, come and follow me. He experiences the life that is found in Jesus. Then he goes back to his house, throws a party so that everybody can come and meet Jesus. They were used by Jesus, raised, unwrapped, and used. Lazarus, raised, unwrapped, and used. Church, listen to me. If we are really raised, if we are really being unwrapped, we will be used. We will be that special instrument, that special utensil, playing to the tune of resurrection power. We will not be able to keep our mouths shut. People will look at our lives and say, wow, I know them. I remember who they were, and they're not that anymore. If we are really unwrapped, if we've really been raised, the people who knew us from the life before will see and they will say, wow, there's something different. If we've really been raised, if we're really being unwrapped, our friends and our family are going to see that our new life points to Jesus. If we've been raised, if we're being unwrapped, the story of Jesus' resurrection power in our life will spread. People are going to talk about it. You won't be able to hide it. You won't be able to keep it secret. I know in the American church, we always talk about a personal relationship, and it ought to be personal to you. You ought to know Jesus personally. But it's not personal in the way that it's private. Our relationship with Jesus is very public. If you've been raised, if you've been unwrapped, it will not be private. It will not be secret. You're going to live it out loud because you will be alive and not dead anymore. And listen to me. If you've been raised and unwrapped, you will have to talk about it. We talk about everything else. We talk about our grandkids. We talk about our jobs. We gossip about our coworkers. Well, we go on and on about our sports teams. If you really experience the resurrection power of Jesus, if Jesus really is the resurrection and the life to you, you will not be able to remain silent. You will want other people to experience that power that you have experienced. You will have to say, I was dead and Jesus made me alive. Closing, I just want to point you to one little phrase. One little phrase. Verse 45. Therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he did believed in him. Therefore, many of the Jews believed in him. Many believed. That phrase. Many believed. I'm going to ask you a question. What would happen? What would happen if you really experienced the resurrection and the life for yourself? What would happen in your sphere of influence? What would happen in your family if you went to lunch today, if you went to the lake today, and you said, listen, I know you probably don't want to hear it, but I have to tell you what Jesus has done in my life. What would happen in your family, at your work, at your job, if you went to work, if you went to family get-togethers, if you got together with your friends and said, listen, I know you've probably heard it before, but you got to hear it again. I can't keep quiet because Jesus has done something real in my life. Look at this. What would happen? For Lazarus and Mary and Martha, many believed. Think about the many who need to believe. Think about the many who need to hear your story, what Christ has done in you, how he brought you from death to life. What would happen? What would happen? What would happen? This morning, have you been raised? morning, have you been raised? Come on, Brent. This morning, have you been raised? Have you experienced this resurrection and life for yourself? If not, today, Jesus is calling. Whatever your name is, He knows it. Come out. Come out. Have you heard it before? If not, Jesus is calling today. Has Jesus been calling the last couple of weeks? Come out. Come out. Have you been raised? Have you been unwrapped? Have you submitted to the process of sanctification? Is Jesus slowly but surely making you into who you were saved to be, who you were made alive to be? Maybe He made you alive, but are you really living? And are you being used? Are you being used? I want to share a staggering statistic that God used to get me and Taylor to Waterford, Michigan. Caleb was joking this morning. I overheard him about why in the world would you leave North Carolina? Well, Michigan is great. But two, here's a statistic for you, Caleb. A few years ago, a survey was done nationwide, and in Waterford, there was a question: do you take your faith seriously? Now, that was a simple question. Yes or no, do you take your faith seriously? Any faith. Could have been Islamic, Christian, Catholic, could have been any faith. Do you take your faith seriously? Man, think about a percentage that you think in Waterford. 16% out of 100. Only 16% of people in Waterford who did that survey said that they take their faith seriously. Are you being used? Because there are people who desperately need to hear the gospel. Who desperately need to hear that, yes, though you are dead, Jesus died death for you, conquered it by raising 3 days later, and now can give you life abundantly and life eternal. Would you be a part of seeing that happen in other people's lives? Have you been raised? Are you being unwrapped? And are you being used? Dear Jesus,